Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture. Funding for Shalom TV has been provided by the following. And by viewers like you.
In the shtetl playing Freilich was a klezmer Elimelech, and one day he thought he'd organize a band. He was a man of great renown till they burned his little town, and he went and sailed off to the Golden Land. He got to Ellis Island, met a drummer from the Highland, and a fiddler from the little town of Gander. He met a Swede and met a Turk, formed a band and went to work. From Elimelech he became Alexander. To Alexander mit seinem Pope. Sich zieh, als mit Pope ist nicht kein Joke. Macht jeden freilich, es ist freiliche Kapelle auf dem Poik-Rebellie sitzt. Ist der größte Knacker, heint in dem ganzen Land, in der Heim, gegangen ist nackt gut. Heint ist reich, will gleich, sie jeden Schutthäusen 2 pur. Der Moral ist, wenn es wird, von Alexander, to Alexander's ragtime band.
Marvelous. I tell you. You have just heard the musical genius of Zalmen Mlotek, who is the artistic director of the National Yiddish Theater, the Folksbiene Theater. And we are in his home, his offices, on the east side of New York City, the home of the Folksbiene Theater, and a place that you now have turned into magic, Zalman. And it is, first of all, thank you so much for letting us come into your home.
Thank you, it's really a pleasure.
And for being willing to sit here. You know, there are so many in our audience, both Jewish and not Jewish, who understand instinctively that Yiddish is the mama lashon, the heart and soul in terms of language of Eastern European Jewry, and in some respects, the Jewish people as a whole. And Zalman, there is a fear that we will lose Yiddish. Right. And what you're doing, in essence, is trying to make sure that doesn't happen. Would you speak to me for a moment from your own perspective? Then we'll talk about the theater itself. Talk to me for a moment first, Zalman, about your feel for Yiddish and where is it in today's contemporary world?
There's more interest in things Yiddish today than in the last 50 years. The explosion of the sounds of Yiddish through the klezmer music revival all over the world is a phenomenon. I mean, in every city in the country, in every major city in Europe, in the former Soviet Union, in Israel, there are klezmer groups performing Yiddish songs. That means that young people are breaking their teeth to get the sounds of Yiddish into their mouths. Why? Because the sounds of Yiddish evoke our whole history. It's one of the important things that we've done in the past several years is when we present anything in Yiddish, everything is with super titles, with English super titles and Russian super titles.
This was your idea.
Yes, this was our we brought that in. We formerly had headsets, and and I maintained that we wanted people to be able to hear the language. We didn't want them to be in an isolated group, like a UN listening to a translation. We wanted them to see and feel the language and see the people speaking it. So now audiences are coming that had no connection with Yiddish, and because Yiddish, there are so many cognates of Yiddish in other languages, so that you don't really have to understand, but you pick up a word here and there from if you are familiar with other languages. So right now, when we do our performances, everything, as I said, is with English and Russian super titles, which opens up the audience to a great extent. We're also doing things for children and young parents who also, again, have no nostalgia connection. I mean, we are dealing with several audiences. On the one hand, we want to serve the audience that has a nostalgic connection that was there, either Mama Lushan or their language that they spoke, or their grandparents or their parents. And on the other, another group is another population completely. My children, who my children are a good example because they've heard Yiddish all their life, but I'm talking my children's generation.
But wait, is it true that you only speak Yiddish to your children?
No, it's not true.
Okay,
That's not true.
it's an exaggeration.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
but they are fluent in Yiddish.
Yeah, so the older one is fluent. The second one and the third one understand and sing and perform everything. They're not. I wouldn't say they're fluent.
Okay.
I grew up in a very unique home. My father, Joseph Mlotek, was the education director of the Workmen's Circle, and then he was an editor of the Forward, the Yiddish newspaper. And in his role as the education director of the Workmen's Circle, he brought Yiddish music to parks. He brought to the festivals. His first festival was at Central Park, where 25,000 people came in. Menashe Skolnick was on the bill. Molly Pickin was on the bill. So that was his idea of bringing Yiddish out there. My mother, who's Tzelengeria, is still with us, and the music archivist, the chief music archivist at the YIVO Institute, has published many, many books of Yiddish folk songs. So I grew up in a home where this was living and breathing material. This wasn't a something on a shelf, something that you study. This was living, breathing. When my mother would hear a new song, it was, she's in her, we're talking about her in her, early 40s. This was an exciting experience. She was excited. She would share it with all of us, and I got that excitement. So I grew up in the home hearing that excitement.
Where was your home?
In the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Yeah.
Now, at some point along the way, and we'll talk just one moment about you, at some point in the way, it becomes clear that you have extraordinary musical talent. At what point, at what age do your parents recognize, and at some point even you, Zalman, recognize about yourself, there's a gift here and you want to follow it?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I knew I sat in on rehearsals. My parents would have musical soirees of the leading Yiddish actors and performers at the time.
How lucky were you?
I was 4 and 5.
How lucky were you?
I was tremendous. It was an experience. I still remember it. I was 4 and 5, and I still remember hiding behind the walls when they thought I was asleep to hear these all-night wild soirees, drunken, singing Yiddish songs. So I grew up in that milieu. I then saw my mother work with singing groups and with amateur groups, and it was from her love of transmitting this music to people, her contemporaries, that I got that bug. And I began to teach it in schools when I was 16. In Yiddish summer camps, I became the music counselor, and I started conducting all the time. I was really leading these singing.
You end up going to Juilliard, yes?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't end up, but I went to Juilliard.
What was that like?
The Juilliard experience was a very intense experience. Juilliard is made up of people who are completely focused on one thing only. In my time, in the late 70s, you walked through the halls of Juilliard, you didn't speak to anybody, you didn't make hardly anybody, you went straight to the practice room and that was it. And as somebody who was, as a person who was working with people all the time, and I was in the conducting program, I had a little difficulty with that. So while Juilliard was an exciting experience, I studied there with Leonard Bernstein, and I studied with Bernstein. I studied with him at Tanglewood the summer before.
What was that like?
The Bernstein experience was an incredible experience because Bernstein was the kind of person that, he had time for everybody. When he sat down with you, his focus was completely on you. And he completely got who I was. Bernstein heard my show, The Golden Land, and he suggested that The Golden Land be presented in Italy at the International New York
How old were you
Festival. I was in the 20-something.
In your 20s,
Yeah.
you've done a show, Golden Land, which is now a classic,
Yeah.
and Bernstein likes it.
He said to me basically, how many Verdi conductors do we need? And who knows and does what you do in the way that you do it?
What was the theme?
The Golden Land was originally started as a tribute to I want to say the 80th anniversary of the Yiddish Forward, and my cousin Moshe Rosenfeld and I compiled songs from that immigrant experience and attached a script to it. So what we did was we found songs that were in the archives, such as Vatcha Step that I talked about, and other songs that depicted the amazing experience of what it felt like to come to America. And for us, the idea of finding these documents that were a mixture of Yiddish and English just was so clear that this was the attempt of the immigrant to totally assimilate. So songs like this song, Amerika, was hat a großen Shem, Amerika, hurra für Onkel Sam, Amerika, kein besseres ist nicht du, hurra, hurra für Red and White and Blue, Amerika, was hat a großen Shem, Amerika, hurra für Onkel Sam, Amerika, kein besseres ist nicht du, hurra, hurra für Red and White and Blue, hurra, 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 hurra. The Golden Land was a true phenomenon here because it was the first time really a bilingual musical was presented in the 80s. And the Times loved it, and so we ran for a long time, and then it evolved from musical in a high school. We traveled to Philadelphia. We worked on it, we changed it, came back to off-Broadway, ran off-Broadway for a while, went to Italy. But throughout it, we gathered more people to work on it. And one of the people that worked on it was Jacques Levy, a wonderful writer and director, and he created some of these wonderful Yiddish lyrics, English lyrics, for these Yiddish songs. And we would work very hard to fight with him to get the right, because we didn't want to translate, but our producers were saying, you must translate. So it was about really getting the right feel. So, for example, here's an example of a song written about their hero, and who was their hero when they came to America? Christopher Columbus. A shtetl is America, except a little bigger. To leave a place so wonderful, you'd have to be Michigan. We got no czar and no pogrom, thanks God for every day here. How lucky for the Yidden that Columbus found his way here. Ice is git, sing alle mit. Long live Columbus, trink briderlach l'chaim. Leben soll Columbus, fahr dem Lande naim. Schreit je Yidden, gläub nicht in die Trombes. Schreit je Yidden, leben soll Columbus, leben soll Columbus. Just one of the songs. Another song that we particularly fell in love with was a song called 50-50, also written around that same time, and originally written in Yiddish, but here's the English version, which we performed. We always started with a little bit of Yiddish. Ich hoff mir wel noch der Leben, I hope to see the day when management and working class will all get equal pay. The socialists will put an end to all that isn't fair. The Astors and the Vanderbilts will have to learn to share. 50-50, oi 50-50. Vanderbilt should sweat and groan. Why should we be all alone? 50-50, la mit rein und mit Turm. Kein Zeit verlieren, schnell einführen. 50-50, no time to lose, I got a taste for 50-50. My brother, he was unemployed for a very long time. He tried to do this, he tried to do that, but he couldn't earn a dime. Then one day he comes to me and he says, hey, Briderl, look at me. I'm a conductor on a trolley car, and I have a share in the company. 50-50, oi 50-50. I ring the bell, 1, 2, 3. A nickel for them, a nickel for me. 50-50, it's as easy as can be. Hat sie der Strickel flieht, a nickel in Käschene zu mir. 50-50, oi 50-50. Vanderbilt wird wie ein Ochs, sitzen, schwitzen, nähen Klocks. 50-50, lo mit rein und mit kein Zeit verlieren, schnell einführen. 50-50, kein Zeit verlieren, schnell einführen. 50-50. And that, after that and several years on the therapist's couch of deciding which direction I wanted to go, classical music or Yiddish music, I decided that I have a mission.
But wait, Zalman, was that a hard decision for you?
tremendously hard decision. It was, when I talk about this several years on the therapist's couch, I'm not kidding. It was a very big decision.
And what tipped the scales towards the Yiddish?
I think a lot of things happened. I got married. I married a beautiful woman who came from a religious home. I did not grow up in a religious home, and although I was very deeply Jewish, as you can hear, the connection of having a connection with religion and with a connection with Torah, and the idea of having a mission to perpetuate that through our children, God bless them. I think all of that, everything put together made it clear to me that this mission of presenting this music and not only this music, but this culture in ways that my contemporaries and contemporaries after me can appreciate became much more important and clear to me.
It is our good fortune that you chose the path you chose. And it's amazing to me, so much of what you do now, as you describe it, resonates to me about how you are having an impact, not simply in the world of, quote, theater and Yiddish theater, but in the world of Jewish experience. Do you understand that the Folksbiene is not simply Yiddish theater? It is an aspect, a facet. The klezmer experience now has become a real facet of contemporary Jewish life.
The theater's mission is to make sure that the riches of this culture can be understood and grasped on whatever level. This goes back. We can do an old Yiddish Jigan and Schumacher sketch, and we can directly relate it to Abbott and Costello or the Marx Brothers. We can directly see the connection of how, these Minnie's boys, the Marx Brothers, could have heard this. Whether they did or not, we don't know for sure, but it could have heard this stuff. So this is it's while we maintain that this is informs our lives and enriches our lives as Jews, we also think and maintain that for non-Jews who are interested in culture and interested in seeing how culture evolves from one generation to another, this is a fascinating story.
Oh, you're so right. What do you say to those who would sort of look at Yiddish and say, it's not serious enough? And at some point, that's why Yiddish began to sort of recede. In the heyday, here in New York, how many Yiddish theaters were there?
In the heyday, when we're talking about in the turn of the century to the 20s, there were sometimes as many as 14 Yiddish theaters on 2nd Avenue alone, running concurrently, showing shows like 10 times a week.
To full houses?
Full houses and different shows.
Different shows, okay. And then at some point, it sort of just falls apart.
Well, the Jewish population moved uptown, which Harlem was uptown at the time, and then of course the Bronx, and then of course Long Island, et cetera, in the suburbs. But and the whole false and detrimental notion of the melting pot, the idea that we're all going to become one mush of people, as opposed to a kaleidoscope of unique cultures. That was lost, and what happened was that generation didn't start to speak Yiddish to children anymore. Mm-hmm. They were purposely, how many stories have you heard of people? Well, my mother would speak to my father when they didn't want me to understand. Well, if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, but that's the case. That was the secret language. But these people who are saying that now, they have this emotional connection to it. Just to address your question about the not being serious, there was always a dichotomy of what to present on the Yiddish theater. You have plays like, on the one hand, the Tzaddik's Mishpacha, which is a melodrama in the true sense of the word. Remember, this is the time, there's no television, there's no entertainment. This is the place where immigrants, hundreds of thousands of immigrants, go to see pictures of themselves, pictures of their country, pictures of their families. So on the one hand, you have the serious yet melodramatic reflection of their life, the Tzaddik's Mishpacha, the rabbi's family, and on the other hand, a completely different take on Yiddish theater called the Nes in Ghetto, the miracle in the ghetto, which talks about the miracle of resistance. which was a miracle. And when you think about, when we think about those dark times, and you think that there was any resistance to that Nazi machine, it was a miracle. So there were plays like that. So, it was called The Miracle of the Warsaw Ghetto, which was an important thing, and this was presented in the 50s and the 60s. So we're talking about important documents, in my mind, that enlighten our view of that generation, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, and are important documents in terms of showing what happened at that time.
Can you speak at all to the notion that Jewish values, that somehow the soul of the Jewish people is conveyed in a way through Yiddish that cannot be conveyed in virtually any other tongue?
Well, it's a fact that the language of our martyrs, of the 6 million, the lingua franca was Yiddish. This was a language spoken, whether it was spoken by rabbis or whether it was spoken by actors or everything in between. This was the language of the street. This language portrayed Jewish life for several hundred years. So every aspect of Jewish life is reflected in the words of Yiddish, in the sounds of Yiddish, in the poems and the songs. When you hear an expression, when you hear somebody tell you a story in Yiddish, and of course you're understanding it, you're hearing a first-hand connection with a time that that is no longer here, but is very deep in our consciousness. For a long time, Yiddish was viewed as the language of the ghetto. When Israel was created in '48, there was most of the creators of the state were Yiddish speakers of Yiddish. Yet they felt that that they needed to have a new language, and they resurrected Hebrew as a spoken language, and there were big fights in Israel about that, and Yiddish was banned. There were Minna Byrne, one of our actresses, tells of stories where she was performing in Yiddish, and the police came and shut them down. So there was this. It was an erroneous. It was an erroneous move. On the one hand, they felt that it was important because they wanted to have unity and they wanted to have a new language. But what they did was by cutting off this language and culture, they cut off their people and future generations to that whole rich Eastern European culture, so that today's young Israelis don't have a very little connection with it because they don't realize that this is their part of their legacy as well.
It's interesting to see how many Yiddishisms have become part of American life.
Right.
Not even just American Jewish life,
Right.
American life
Sure.
in general,
You can't open a New York Times or a Wall Street Journal today without finding a Yiddish word in it.
Give me 2 or 3 examples.
Well, nudge and kvetch and shlemazel and shlemiel, and those are the plots and
And a maisa. What's a maisa?
A maisa, that's a story.
What's a bubba maisa?
A bubba maisa is literally translated as like my grandmother's story, but it means it never happened.
Right.
But they say in Yiddish there are so many different ways of expressing love. Ich hab dich lieb, I love you. Mein Blut kocht, my blood is boiling. Ich geh aus nach dir, I'm dying for you. Ich pege nach dir, I'm dying. Ich starb nach dir. These are all expressions of of saying I love you in Yiddish.
My grandfather always put me to bed with the words, Shluv gesund, shliuv gesund. And I would respond to him, du ech.
Nice.
And when I have my children, I put them to bed with the words, Shluv gesund,
Nice.
you should go to sleep healthy and well. Shliuv gesund, you get up well. And they say to me, du ech, you
Nice.
too. It is so sweet, isn't it?
Yeah, it reminds me of the Gershwin story, that George Gershwin heard his mother sing this song. Schlaf mein Vögele, sleep my little bird. Mach zu die Egele, close your eyes. Schlaf mein taie Kind, sleep my dear child. Schlaf mein Vögele, mach zu die Egele. Schlaf mein Taya. So George Gershwin says he heard this and he turned it into this. My one and only, what are you gonna do if you turn me down? I am so crazy over Schlaf mein Fegele. So when you think about, and Yiddish lullabies, there's so many, hundreds of Yiddish lullabies, because it was
They
in
give
that,
me goose pimples, Zalman.
oh yeah, and it was in those moments, you know, there's a Yiddish lullaby that hundreds of thousands of immigrants sang in the old country about America. It says, it was written by Shalom Aleichem, our great writer. It says, in America is for jeden, Zalmen Mlotek. In America, they say it's an amazing place. Dort nest men in der Wochen, Challah, Sonne and you. They eat challah during the week. Yaichalach will ich dir kochen, and I'll make you soups. Schlaf je Sonne and you. Yaichalach will ich dir kochen, Schlaf je Sonne and you. This reflects the idea and the experience of families being torn apart. How many stories do we know of a father going to America first, or a grandfather, an uncle to go first, and then bringing the other family? So one verse says, wird schicken $20, sein Porträt dazu. He'll send $20 and with his picture in it, his portrait. Und wird nehmen leben sollen, unser hin zu, and he'll bring us there. He should only live so long. Und wird nehmen leben sollen, unser hin zu. Just a little
Which means?
Lullaby. So, and he'll bring us there. He should only live so long. And so, in the meantime, sleep, my son.
That's the story of my grandfather.
Yeah.
And many grandfathers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you do a medley for a few moments of all the Yiddish, which whenever you talk to somebody who doesn't know a lot about Yiddish, those are the melodies that come to mind?
Sure. One of the most familiar and classic Yiddish songs is Songwriting and Folklore. It talks about the on the fireplace, and what makes a song a hit? What makes a song a great melody and a lyric that speaks to you or speaks to hundreds of thousands or millions in the case of Madonna, for instance. So, for instance, in a case like Oif and Pripachik, right, in a song where it says, on the fireplace stands the rabbi, or he's sitting, the rabbi, by the fireplace, and in the house it's quiet and warm, and the rabbi is standing with the little children and teaching them the aleph-beis, the alphabet. It goes like this. Auf dem Pripachik brennt a Feuer und in Stub ist heiß und der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach dem aleph-beis und der Rebbe lernt kleine Kinderlach dem aleph-beis. Sagt ihr Kinderlach, gedenkt ihr Teire, was ihr lernt da. Sagt ihr noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet alle vor. Sagt ihr noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet alle vor. Als ihr wird Kinderlach älter werden, wird ihr allein verstehen, wie viel in die Äusjes liegen Tränen und wie viel Gewehen. Wie viel in die Äusjes liegen Tränen und wie viel Gewehen. Sagt ihr Kinderlach, gedenkt ihr Teire, was ihr lernt da. Sagt ihr noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet alle vor. Sagt ihr noch einmal und Tage noch einmal, kommet alle vor. So this is probably one of the most familiar Yiddish songs, and interestingly enough, it comes from the Yiddish Theater. It was written in the 1870s by Abraham Goldfadden, who's called the father of the Yiddish Theater, and it's from an operetta called Shalamis. And Shalamis was a kind of a 19th century romantic novel, and this song comes from that operetta. And the text says, in the great temple, in the holy temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, in a little corner, sits the widow, the daughter of Zion. Her child, Yidele, her little child, her little child, Yiddel. Yiddel is a little diminutive for a little Jew, but it's also a name. Wiegt sie Keseda, she's constantly rocking. Und wiegt ihm zum Schlafen ein Liederle schön, and rocks him to sleep with a beautiful, beautiful melody. Unter Yiddeles Wiegele, under Yiddeles cradle, steht a klar weiß Ziegele. So under this cradle stands a clear white goat. The clear white goat is a symbol, a traditional symbol of prosperity and good fortune in Jewish folklore. Unter Yiddeles Wiegele steht a klar weiß Ziegele. Unter Yiddeles Wiegele steht a klar weiß Ziegele. And it says the Ziegele is gefahren handeln, and this little goat went to the market. Das wird sein dein Baruf, and this will be your calling. Rojinkes mit Mandeln, raisins and almonds. Why raisins and almonds? Probably the sweetest delicacy they could find in the shtetl. Shlov she'yidele shlov. The second verse says, Es wird kommen a Zeit von Eisenbahnen. It'll come a time from iron trains. Remember, this was written in the 1870s. Sie werden verfleizen die ganze Welt. They'll cover half the world. Eiserne Wegen wirst du euch spannen. And you'll go on these iron roads. Und wirst in dem euch verdienen viel Geld. And you'll make a lot of money. This will be your business. Und als du wirst werden reich, Yiddele, and as you become prosperous, sollst du gedenken dem schein Liederle. Remember this song. Rojinkes mit Mandeln. Das wird sein dein Baruf. This will be your calling. Yiddele wird alt handeln. This will be your calling. Shlov Yiddele shlov. Remember, this was a song performed by Jan Pierce, Richard Tucker, the greats of the time. So I'm only giving you a sample of it. So, in dem Beis Habikdash, in a Winkel Cheder, sitzt die Almone Bastion allein. Ihr ben Jochidl Yiddelen, wiegt sie Keseder und singt ihm zum Schlafen a Liederle schön. Unter Yiddeles Wiegele steht a klar weiß Ziegele. Das Ziegele ist gefahren handeln. Das wird sein dein Baruf. Rojinkes mit Mandeln. Schlaf, Yiddele, schlaf. Es wird kommen a Zeit von Eisenbahnen. Sie werden verfleizen die ganze Welt. Eiserne Wegen wirst du euch spannen und wirst in dem euch verdienen viel Geld. Und als du wirst, werden reich, Yiddele, soll sich der Mannen in dem Schein Liederle. Rojinkes mit Mandeln. Das wird sein dein Baruf. Yiddele wird als handeln. Schlaf, Yiddele, schlaf, Yiddele, schlaf, Yiddele, schlaf, ein, schlaf. This is one of the classics of the Yiddish theater. Shem Vida Levana, pretty like the moon, beautiful like the stars. You're a gift from the heavens. My luck I found when I found you. You shine like 1,000 suns. I mean, true Nelson Eddy, Jeanette MacDonald stuff from the late 1940s. And of course, it became a big hit, and it became a swing song as well. Shem Vidi Levana, Licht wie die Stern, von Himmel am Matone, bist du mir sie geschickt. Mein Glück hab ich gefunden, wenn ich hab dich gewinnen. Die scheinst wie tausend Sinnen, du hast mein Herz beglückt. Deine Zähndelach weiß wie Perlach, mit deine schönen Augen, deine Herrlach, deine Lippelach, hast mit sie gezeugen, schön wie die Levonne, lichtig wie die Sterne, von Himmel am Matone, bist du mir, bist du mir, bist du mir, bist du mir, bist du mir sie geschickt. The other music that was heard in my home all the time alongside Yiddish music was G&S, was Gilbert and Sullivan. I am the very model of a modern major general. I have information, vegetable, animal, and mineral. I know the kings of England. I quote the fights historical, from Marathon to Waterloo, and order categorical. So we have Al Grand to thank for the masterful Yiddish lyrics. Al Grand is a wonderful retired school teacher who fell in love with Yiddish at an early age and fell in love with Gilbert and Sullivan at an early age. And he came and not only did he adapt these, translate these, but he adapted them. So the Pirates of Penzance were no longer noblemen who went wrong, and they were shachtim. They were you know, meat slaughterers and yeshiva bachas who went wrong and became pirates. Ich bin der größte General und ich bin euch ein guter Jid. Ich geh euch rechnen alle meine Meiles in ein Jiddisch Lied. Ich hab ein klugen Kopf und ich versteh Einsteins Theorie. Ich kenn erzählen alles von der ganzen Welthistorie. Ich bin sehr gut bekannt mit allen Meises von dem Bobbesand. Ich tanz und singe und mache Spaß, ich bin ein Mensch von größter Land. Ich kenn gut machen lecker und ich weiß von Fotografie. Fotografie, Raffia, Taffia, Raffia. Ah! Ich kenn gut schießen und ich hab nicht Meure von der Mafia.
Ich bin ein größer General und ich bin euch ein guter Jid. Ich geh euch rechnen alle Meiles in ein Jiddisch. Ich hab einen klugen Kopf und ich versteh Einsteins Theorie. Ich kann erzählen alles von der ganzen Welthistorie. Ich bin sehr gut bekannt mit allen Meises von dem Operettas. Ich sing und tanze und mache Spaß, ich bin ein Mensch mit größter Land. Ich kenn alle Backen und ich weiß von Fotografie. Ich gehe schießen und hab nicht kein Meuger von der Mafia.
Er kann gut schießen und er hat nicht Meure von der Mafia. Ich lerne gut Gemorre und mit Teure bin ich gut bekannt. Und allemal bei Tag, bei Nacht halt ich ein Tillem in der Hand. In kurzem will ich sagen euch und ich verrenne dich schon mein Lied. Ich bin ein größer General und ich bin euch ein guter Jid. In kurzem will ich sagen euch, ich verrenne euch mein Lied. Ich bin ein größer General und ich bin euch ein guter Jid.
That's wonderful, just wonderful.
Yeah, it was delicious. This was the first time, this was really a world premiere of this piece, and the Folksbiene has been involved with other world premieres. We did the world premiere of Yentl in Yiddish. Of course, after Barbara Streisand did it in English and Basheva Singer wrote it, we took it back to the original story and did the original in Yiddish. Other things that we're doing is our kids show, our Kids in Yiddish.
Tell me about the kids.
We call it a mixture of Saturday Night Live meets Sesame Street, where we give people a moment of a Yiddish influence. For instance, we'll do a farm scene of kids on the farm, and they'll be singing, Alte Donald hat a farm, ay, 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 etc., etc. Or we'll teach them the alphabet. Aleph, ah, and sometimes ah, bays, that's not the way to be. Or we'll find a way to bring them, you know, a scene from contemporary culture, like, when I write this letter, it makes me feel so good. Few things could be better than the letter Yud. Lots of words start with this tiny letter, like Yiddish, Yontif, Yedda. P.S. I love Yud. Yud, Yud, Yud. Stuff like that. So what we do in Kids in Yiddish is mostly in English, kind of give them a little taste. This is a song in 2001, after 9/11. Michael Fox wrote this, which became a kind of an anthem. I see a rainbow, a Regenbogen. It's filled with all the colors anybody knows. A Regenbogen, it stands for Shalom, with colors yellow, green, and blue, and red, and rose. I see a rainbow, a Regenbogen, where it begins and ends, nobody ever knows. A Regenbogen, it stands for Freiheit, freedom, mit Farben gelb und grün und blau und rot und rose. I will gather the Farben colors from each bloom that the golden suns unfurled, from each thing that grows or stands or flows. Make a Regenbogen for our precious world. I see the mountains, the mighty oceans, die grüne Berg, die blaue Yamens rise and swell. I see my family, my friends around me, with faces braun und weiß und schwarz und rot und gelb. I see a rainbow, a Regenbogen. It stirs in me the strongest feelings that I felt. A Regenbogen, es glanzt vor die Augen, and in my heart ich feel wie schön's kann sein die Welt. A Regenbogen, it stands for Shalom, and in my heart ich feel wie schön's kann sein die Welt. A song like that, when it's sung by our children,
Here's the heart of
you know, what better message can we as human beings give, and then tie it to our Yiddishkeit? What this show is doing is we're bringing young parents who also, again, have no nostalgic connection necessarily to Yiddish, but they heard Yiddish somewhere. If you grow up in New York, it's hard not to go. But even outside New York, if you have any kind of connection with Jewish life, some Yiddish words have crept in, whether it's through the food or whatever.
You haven't talked to me about food.
Well, there's hundreds of songs about food in Yiddish song. Of course, probably the most famous one is Ech Romania, 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 given am Land das süß schöne. And the food part gets dort zu wollen ist gewen a Vergnügen. Was das Hausglüs das Kind kriegen. Am Mameligele is your food. Ach Pastoramele, a Kanatzele, und a Gläsele Wein. But one of the earliest Yiddish songs talks about the earliest Jewish diet, which at the time in the early 1800s was potatoes every day. Sonntag bulbus, Montag bulbus, every day of the week, potatoes. And it was Sonntag bulbus, Montag bulbus, Dienstag und Mittwoch bulbus, Donnerstag und Freitag bulbus, every day. Shabbos in an oven, Shabbos for a new thing. A bulbe kugel, a kugel made of, und Sonntag weiter bulbus, from the repertoire of Aaron Lebedev. Oi, hodel, 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 was hält sich mit dem Strudel? Es ist Geschmack, ich hab es sehr lieb. Ich darf kein Fleisch, kein Zimmes, weil alles ist mir nimmes. Oi, hodel, hodel, give dem Strudel, give. I have a landsman, his name's Doodle. He has a Bible and her name's Huddle. And Huddle, Doodle, leben sich ganz wohl, they live very nicely. And his lovely Bible Huddle makes the most outstanding strudel. Such a pleasure, mamish, that it melts right in your mouth. Every Shabbos after shul, he quells. He runs home to his Bible and he yells, oi, oi, those smells, oi. Hodel, 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 was hält sich mit dem Strudel? Es ist Geschmack, ich hab es sehr lieb. Ich darf kein Fleisch, kein Zimmes, weil alles ist mir nimmes. Oi, hodel, hodel, give them strudel, give.
Zalman, anytime one now goes to a Yom HaShoah commemoration, a moment of tribute and memory to those who perished in the Holocaust, there are often Yiddish songs sung.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that?
I think it's tremendously important, not only because of that this was the language, but it's so important to realize that the Holocaust represents the end of an era that was so rich, so many years of Yiddish life and creativity. We think of the shtetl. It wasn't only the shtetl. This was, Warsaw and Vilna and Bialystok. These were cosmopolitan, rich, sophisticated cities with scientific institutes, with cultural institutions. So wasn't just all the quaint shtetl like Tevye and Fiddler on the Roof. These were cosmopolitan cities that were destroyed. So when I present songs that were written during the time of the Holocaust or during the time of the concentration specifically, and songs of resistance, songs that show that through song and through words, just through song and words, they held on to this and it gave them hope.
Is there one song you can do?
There's 10 songs.
Do a song of resistance and hope.
Right. So this is a song that was created in the Vilna ghetto. The Vilna ghetto had schools, it had theaters. We're talking about the ghetto, remember, that was enclosed by the Nazis. Art exhibitions, and this song was a song written for the youth organization, sung by children. And it says, "Our song is sad but firm, and our step is strong. Though the enemy stands by the gate, the youth storms ahead, because young is everyone who wants to be. Years may mean nothing. Old people can also be young for a new and free time. Unser Lied ist voll mit Treue, dreist ist unser Muntergang. Chotsch der Säune wacht beim Teuer, stürmt Jugend mit Gesang. Weil jung ist jeder, wer es will noch. Jung haben kein Badeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer neuen, freier Zeit. Wir gedenken alle Sonnen, we remember our enemies, wir Dämonen, alle Freunde, and we remember our friends, ewig wollen wir verbinden. We will always try to tie together unser Nächten, our past, hidden heint with our present. Weil jung ist jeder, wer es will noch, because young is everyone who wants to be. Jung haben kein Badeit. Alte kennen euch sein Kinder von einer neuen, freier Zeit. Written in 1943 in the Vilna ghetto.
That's marvelous. So Zalman, I want you to do for me, here I am, I need some rabbi songs. Do some rabbi songs.
Many rabbi songs.
Yes.
This is a humorous rabbi song. As the Rebbe Elimelech is geworden sehr.
I'm sorry. What's above your head?
That's our super titles.
That's the super title.
That's how people can hear it, and yet understand everything that's going on.
Very nice. Go ahead, do it for me.
Hat ausgetan die Zwillen und hat angetan die Brillen und geschickt noch die Fiddler, die zwei. Und als die Fiddeldicke Fiddler haben Fiddeldicke Fiddelt haben sie. Und als die Fiddeldicke Fiddler haben Fiddeldicke Fiddelt haben sie. Und als der Rebbe tanzt, tanzen alle Chassidim. Tanzen alle Chassidim, als der Rebbe tanzt, tanzen alle Chassidim, als der Rebbe tanzt, tanzen alle Chassidim, und als der Rebbe esst, essen alle Chassidim, als der Rebbe esst, essen alle Chassidim, as the Rebbe est, essen alle Chassidim.
Marvelous.
Thank you.
Marvelous.
Thank you.
I love the super titles.
That's it. That's the answer. That's how people can appreciate the Yiddish, hear it, and never feel they're uninvolved.
Okay. Bowie, just a practical question.
Yeah.
How does the Folksbiene Theater support itself?
With the support of people out there who care and understand that this is of value.
Is this a nonprofit organization?
Completely nonprofit. We depend completely on, ticket sales amount to maybe, 30% of our annual budget. We purposely keep our ticket prices at a reasonable level so that people of all income brackets can enjoy it. People should understand that this is all about either making connections, reaching into their pockets, supporting our work for so that we can continue with our creativity.
And so that was our meeting with Zalmen Mlotek, the artistic director of the National Yiddish Theater, the Folksbiene Theater. We hope you enjoyed meeting this extraordinary man and hearing about the world of Yiddish as it still lives throughout the United States of America in this extraordinary experiment in contemporary Jewish life. You've already seen how to be in touch with the Folksbiene. Let us put their email address up one more time. And if you'd like to be in touch yourself with Zalman, you can do it by writing to us. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me. Share your thoughts about meeting Zalmen Mlotek by writing to Rabbi Golub at shalomtv.com. And so until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
Regenbogen, it stands for Shalom, and in my heart ich feel wie schön es kann sein, die Welt.